My fiancée, Claire Holloway, stood in the kitchen with both hands wrapped around a coffee mug she was not drinking from. She looked at me and said, "Ethan, you found my new number." I stopped halfway through loosening my tie and stared at the way her fingers trembled against the ceramic. "Who?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Brandon," she whispered. The name landed in our quiet townhouse in Westfield, New Jersey, like something dirty dragged in from outside. Claire lowered her eyes and swallowed hard. "He texted me from another number." I crossed the kitchen in 2 steps. "Let me see it." She hesitated for just a second before handing me her phone. The message on the screen was short. "You think a ring changes what belongs to me?" My jaw tightened so fast it hurt. I looked up at her and saw what I thought was fear. Real fear. The kind that makes a person look smaller inside their own skin. "He does not get to do this to you anymore," I said. Claire nodded, but her face did not soften. It was almost like my reassurance made her more nervous, not less. That should have meant something to me right then. It did not. Because when you love someone, you do not begin with suspicion. You begin with protection. Claire and I had been engaged for 4 months. We had met at a charity gala in Manhattan, one of those polished nights full of forced laughter, expensive watches, and people pretending they were not studying each other. She had seemed different from everyone else in that room. Less performative, less hungry. She was elegant without trying too hard. Beautiful in a way that made men pause and women narrow their eyes. I noticed both. But what pulled me toward her was not beauty. It was sadness. Not dramatic sadness. Not attention-seeking sadness. A contained one. A quiet ache hidden behind perfect posture and careful smiles. Months later, when she finally told me about Brandon Mercer, the ex she described as controlling, jealous, and emotionally brutal, that sadness seemed to make sense. She said he tracked her movements. She said he called her workplace. She said he once sat outside her apartment for 3 hours because she had not answered fast enough. She never called herself a victim. That made me believe her even more. She told the story like someone ashamed of what she had endured. I wanted to be the life she stepped into after surviving all that. The calm after the storm. The man who did not frighten her. The man who did not demand. The man who stayed. So when she said Brandon had found her number, something primitive flared in me. Not ego. Responsibility. At least that is what I called it then. "Block him again," I said. "I already did. Then if he contacts you from another number, we document it." She gave a weak nod. "And if he comes near you, I handle it." That made her eyes rise quickly to mine. Too quickly. "No," she said. "No what?" "No confrontación." Her answer came sharp, almost panicked. Then she softened her voice. "Please, Ethan. He feeds on conflict. He wants a reaction." I leaned against the counter and studied her. She seemed sincere, but there was something else there. Not just fear of Brandon. Fear of what I might uncover if I got involved. Back then, I mistook that for trauma. Love will do that. It will hand your instincts a blindfold and call it trust. The next 2 weeks turned our engagement into a quiet siege. Claire began jumping at sounds she used to ignore. She kept curtains closed during the day. She checked the security camera app so often that even the notification tone started making me tense. Twice she woke me up after midnight because she thought she heard a car idling outside. Both times, by the time I reached the window, the street was empty. She became more affectionate too, more dependent. She started reaching for my hand in crowded places. Started asking me to come with her for errands she normally did alone. Started thanking me for things that did not need gratitude. "Thank you for answering the door. Thank you for walking me to my car. Thank you for staying home tonight." If I'm being honest, some part of me responded to that. Not because I enjoyed her fear, because I enjoyed being needed. That is the part men do not say out loud. Sometimes protection feels dangerously close to purpose. One Friday evening, we were supposed to have dinner with my parents in Short Hills. Claire came downstairs already dressed, but pale. She held up her phone and said, "He sent flowers to my office." I took the card from her hand. "Still thinking of you." No name. No signature. None needed. I looked at her and felt anger rise like a fever. "Enough." She stepped back before I even moved. I said, "No confrontation. I'm not going to punch the guy in a parking lot, Claire." "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out exactly what he is doing and make it stop. Her lips parted. For a moment, she did not look relieved. She looked cornered. Let me ask you something. If the person you loved seemed terrified, but also strangely resistant to being helped, would you keep pushing forward, or would you back away and trust their silence? That night, while Claire showered upstairs, I sat in my study and did something I probably should have done months earlier. I looked Brandon Mercer up. He was not hard to find. His LinkedIn profile said he worked in commercial real estate in Hoboken. His Instagram was private. His Facebook had not been updated in over a year. No restraining order that I could find. No arrest record. No scandal. Nothing that matched the monster Claire had described. That did not prove anything. Abusive men often look polished in public. I knew that. But then I found something else. An old photo from a charity board event in Montclair. Claire was in it. So was Brandon. They were standing 3 feet apart. The date was 6 months after she claimed she had cut all contact. Both of them were smiling. Not politely. Comfortably. Intimately. I stared at the image until the shower upstairs stopped running. When Claire came into bed, hair damp and skin warm from the steam, she curled against me like she always did. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My first instinct was not betrayal. It was rationalization. Maybe the date was wrong. Maybe it was an old upload. Maybe she had gone because she felt forced. The human mind will build 10 fragile bridges before it accepts one ugly truth. The next morning, I called my friend Nolan Pierce. Nolan was an attorney in Manhattan and the kind of man who preferred evidence over emotion. I told him enough to make him concerned, but not enough to embarrass Claire. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "You want the clean answer or the comforting answer?" "The clean one." Something in her story does not hold. I stared out the office window at the gray March sky, meaning either she is minimizing recent contact, or the ex is not the only threat in the picture. "Can you help me verify something discreetly?" Nolan sighed. "I can point you in the right direction." By Monday, I had more information than I wanted. Brandon Mercer had moved to Boston nearly a year earlier. His company page confirmed it. A property journal mentioned his relocation. And one more detail cut through me like glass. He had gotten married in September. Married. Claire had been crying in my kitchen over a man who had a wife, a new city, and apparently a completely different life. I sat in my car outside our townhouse for 20 minutes before going inside. I kept hearing her voice. "He found my number. He won't leave me alone. He feeds on conflict." Every sentence now sounded less like fear and more like choreography. Inside, Claire was on the living room sofa in cream loungewear, laptop open, one leg folded under her. She looked up and smiled. Then she saw my face. "What happened?" I closed the door quietly behind me. "Brandon lives in Boston." The smile vanished. I watched her carefully. Not shock, not confusion, calculation. "Where did you hear that?" "So it is true." She stood up slowly. "Ethan." "No." I held up a hand. "You do not get to use that tone with me right now." For the first time since I had known her, her expression hardened instead of breaking. "It is more complicated than that." "Then simplify it." She looked away first. That was when I knew. Not all of it, but enough. Claire set the laptop aside and said, "He did move." I laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because something in me had started to crack. "You let me believe he was stalking you." "He was abusive." "Was." "Yes." "Then why is he still the center of every room in this house?" Her breathing changed. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. "Thanks." She folded her arms like she was cold. Then she said something I still remember word for word, because it was easier than telling you the truth. The room went very still. "What truth?" She pressed her lips together so tightly they almost disappeared. Then she said, "It is not Brandon I am afraid of." I felt my pulse in my throat. "Then who?" She looked straight at me. "My father." I had met Charles Holloway 3 times. A hedge fund titan from Greenwich, Connecticut. Controlled smile. Controlled handshake. Controlled room. The kind of man who never raised his voice because he never had to. People moved around him the way smaller boats move around a yacht. Claire had always been different after seeing him. More withdrawn. More brittle. I had noticed. I just never placed it correctly. She sat down as if her legs could no longer hold her. When Brandon and I were together, my father used him. I did not speak. If I interrupted, I knew she might stop. He liked that Brandon kept me isolated. He liked knowing where I was. He liked that I had someone around who would report back to him. The blood drained from my face. What are you saying? I am saying Brandon was awful. I'm also saying he was useful. Useful to your father? She nodded. My mind tried to reject it. This was too polished, too rich, too suburban. People like Charles Holloway were supposed to ruin lives in boardrooms, not inside their own families. But power is power. It changes costumes. That is all. Claire told me things in fragments. Never dramatically. Never with tears she tried to display. That was what made it worse. Her father had controlled her money long into adulthood. He had inserted himself into leases, jobs, friendships, even therapy. If she pulled away, he cut her off. If she resisted, he punished her without ever leaving a visible mark. Brandon had started as a boyfriend, then became an extension, an observer, a messenger, a leash. When I left Brandon for good, my father lost direct access, she said. He hated that. So the messages? She looked ashamed. Some were real. From whom? She stared at the rug. From my father's assistant. I closed my eyes. You let me think it was your ex. I thought if I named my father, you would either leave or try to fight him. And the flowers. From him. In the car outside. I did not imagine that. I believed her. That was the terrible part. Now that she was finally telling the truth, I believed her. Because the lie had been elegant. But the truth was ugly in the specific ways real things are ugly. I sat across from her and felt two opposite emotions battling in my chest. Compassion and fury. Compassion for what she had survived. Fury for what she had done with my trust. Why not tell me? She laughed bitterly and wiped under one eye. Because men think they understand danger when it looks like another man throwing punches. They do not understand what money, influence, and family can do when it wants access without witnesses. That line stayed with me. Because it was true. I had been preparing to confront a villain. Not a system. Not a father. Not the kind of abuse that wears a Navy suit and donates to hospitals. The midpoint of our engagement was the night I realized the problem in front of me was not the one I had volunteered to solve. I had offered to protect Claire from an ex. What she needed was someone willing to believe that danger can come wrapped in respectability. But even then, the power shift in the story was not finished. 3 days later, Charles Holloway called me directly. I was leaving my office in Midtown when his name lit up my phone. He had never called me before. Not once. I answered and stepped back inside the lobby. Ethan, he said warmly. I hear Claire has been under stress. My spine stiffened. Did she tell you that? A pause, then a mild chuckle. Claire has always had a flair for emotional narratives. I gripped the phone harder. What do you want? To congratulate you, actually. On what? On discovering that my daughter is not always truthful. The elevator doors opened behind me and closed again. I did not move. You knew she lied to me. I know my daughter. Then maybe you know why. His voice cooled by a degree. Be careful, Ethan. That sounds like a threat. That sounds like advice. He went on to say Claire had a history of paranoia, that she rewrote events, that she attached to men quickly and turned them into rescuers. For one dangerous second, he was almost convincing, not because I trusted him, because he sounded exactly like men in power sound when they have been getting away with something for decades. Measured, patient, reasonable. He never raised his voice. He simply repositioned the truth until I could see how weaker people might drown in it. Then he delivered the line that told me everything. If you're going to marry into this family, you should learn not to indulge her episodes. Her episodes, not her fears, not her pain. Her episodes. I said, I'm not marrying into your family. He went quiet. I'm marrying her. Then I ended the call. That night, I played the recording for Claire. Yes, I had recorded it. For the first time since this began, she did not look frightened. She looked vindicated. Then she looked ashamed again. I am sorry, she said. For all of it. For lying. For making you carry the wrong story. I sat beside her on the floor of our bedroom, backs against the bed, and let the silence sit with us. I'm still angry, I admitted. You should be. I do not know what part of this is damage and what part is choice. She nodded slowly. Neither do I, some days. That honesty did more for me than any apology could have. Because healing never starts with perfect language. It starts with one true sentence. From there, we got practical. Nolan helped us connect Claire with a family law specialist outside her father's orbit. A forensic accountant traced trusts and controls she had never fully understood. A security consultant reviewed our home, our accounts, our devices. We learned her father still had access to an old email recovery chain. We learned one of the flowers had been ordered through a private concierge used by his office. We learned Claire's fear had been real even when her story had not. That is the part people struggle with. A liar can still be in danger. A damaged person can still deserve protection. A victim can make terrible decisions. Truth does not become false just because it arrived late. The hardest part was not dealing with Charles. It was deciding what Claire and I were after all of this. Because love is tested less by whether pain exists and more by whether trust can survive its shape. Some nights we talked until 2 in the morning. Some nights we slept inches apart and felt miles away. Some mornings I looked at her and saw the woman I wanted to marry. Other mornings, I saw the person who had built our home on a lie, even if she built it while trying to outrun something worse. Let me ask you this. If someone lied to you because they were afraid, and the lie pulled you into a real danger you did not understand, would love be enough to stay, or would trust already be broken beyond repair? The answer did not come all at once. It arrived in moments, in therapy sessions, in legal meetings. In a way, Claire stopped asking me to save her and started telling the truth, even when it made her look bad. That mattered. More than tears. More than promises. More than saying she was sorry. Truth without self-protection. That was new. That was costly. That was real. 3 months later, Charles Holloway hosted his annual spring fundraiser in Greenwich. He sent Claire an invitation through his assistant. No note. No apology. Just an embossed card as if nothing had happened. She held it over the kitchen trash and looked at me. What would you do? I said, what do you want to do? She dropped it in the bin. Then she smiled in a way I had never seen before. Not relieved. Not fragile. Free. It was a small act. But some revolutions happen in silk gloves and quiet kitchens. By summer, Claire had separated her finances, changed counsel, and cut every non-essential channel her father used to reach her. He did not stop immediately. Men like Charles never stop cleanly. They fade in stages. They test doors. They test guilt. They test whether silence might still work. But it stopped working. That was enough. As for Brandon, we later learned he had not contacted Claire in over 8 months. He had moved on with his life. In the beginning, that fact had made me feel stupid. By the end, it made me realize how badly fear can borrow old names when the real one feels too dangerous to speak. Claire and I postponed the wedding. Not because we were ending things, because pretending everything was healed would have been one more lie. And we were done building a future on lies, even protective ones. A year after that first message in the kitchen, we stood in a small stone chapel in Princeton with fewer than 40 people present. No society pages. No donors. No Holloway money. No Charles. When Claire walked toward me, she did not look like someone being rescued. She looked like someone arriving as herself. That was the difference. That was the victory. Not that I saved her. Not that I defeated some villain. Not that love conquered everything. It did not. What happened was quieter and harder. She told the truth. I chose whether I could live inside it. And together, slowly, we built something that did not require a false story to survive. Sometimes people ask me when I first knew I wanted to marry Claire. They expect me to say the gala, or our first trip to Nantucket, or the night I proposed by the water in Cape May. But the truth is stranger than that. I knew when she finally told me the version of herself that did not make her easy to love. That was the moment I met the real woman. Not the polished one. Not the frightened one performing a simpler danger. The real one. And loving a real person will always cost more than loving the story they hand you. But it is the only love worth trusting. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the story is not the one with the worst reputation. It is the one nobody dares describe honestly. And sometimes the bravest thing two people can do is stop asking who gets blamed and start asking what truth can survive between them. That is what saved us. Not certainty, not revenge, just truth, finally spoken in full, and the decision to build from there. What's your personal reflection? If you were in Ethan's place, would you have stayed after learning the truth, or would the lie have ended everything?